Hello, my name is Kimberly, and this is my channel, The Amazing Kimeth. Today we are going over the book Ritual by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. I will be including spoilers with this book since it has not been translated into English from the original Russian. So let's get into this. This book did inspire the film On Dracon, or He is Dragon, to be made. However, the film is just loosely inspired by this book. The book and the film are two very different things. However, they can still be enjoyed on their own. So this story starts off with Armand. Armand is a dragon that can shapeshift into a man. His lineage has this destiny that he must fulfill where they sacrifice a beautiful girl on an altar and they follow through whatever ritual they need to. So he has this magic mirror that he looks through and he sees this beautiful princess that he wants to choose, and he knows that there's going to be a festival that's coming up. And he's thinking this is going to be a perfect time to swoop in, take this girl back to his castle, and then do what he has to do. However, things do not go as planned. This princess has a sister, Yuta, and Yuta is not pretty. She does not have a beautiful body, and since she knows this, she has a terrible temper as well. She has a crummy personality. She's always envious of the pretty ladies that are around her. She's pretty rough and tumble, and she ends up getting into a fight the day of this festival. And with this festival, these ladies have to wear these beautiful hats, and the way it's described in the book, it reminds me of the World War II propaganda poster of Lady America wearing a battleship as her hat, and that's just kind of how it's described. And all these ladies have these gorgeous hats. Well, Yuta, being Yuta and her crummy personality, she gets into a fight. Her hat is destroyed in the process of this fight, but her beautiful, kind-hearted sister goes, "Yuta, you can wear my hat for the festival." And that's where things go wrong. Armand the dragon swoops in, thinking he's grabbing the beautiful princess, but in fact, he's grabbing Yuta, and he takes her back to the castle and drops her on the sacrificial altar, and then things go awry. Yuta fights back, and then he realizes, oh God, I made a terrible mistake, and he can't go through with this ritual. And then he knows there's another step to the ritual where someone has to come and rescue her. And he's like, all right, someone's gonna come and rescue you. And she's like, no, people don't like me. No one's coming. So then the next part goes on. So with that, Armand is then going, all right, well, we're gonna figure things out. He tries to lock her in like a little cell. She knows magic, so she says what needs to say to destroy the lock. He's like, oh, I really have to deal with you. And of course, she's got this terrible personality, so she's really rude. He's not used to dealing with people because he's a dragon. He is the last of his kind. So then the story really starts where it's these two people that are not good people. They don't have good personalities, but they have to learn to deal with each other and then grow and mature themselves. And so with that, every day Armand goes out because he's a dragon and he has to eat. So he goes and he eats goats or finds little calves to swallow whole, and Yuta is just wandering the castle every day. And she goes down these corridors and she sees all these writings on the wall, and she learns the language and she figures it out, and she reads the ritual that's been inscribed on these walls and what's required of Armand, and then what happens later on, or what could happen later on. So she's dealing with this and she's trying to talk with him, and he really wants nothing to do with her, but slowly through day and day, they learn each other and their personality, and they become nicer to each other. He finds out that she just is unlovable. People do not like her. She finds the magic mirror and she sees that her loved ones are kind of happier without her, and she goes through this depression. Armand decides he takes it upon himself and he finds one of the princes and he challenges the prince that the prince needs to save this princess and slay the dragon. And so this prince, who really doesn't want to conquer a dragon and kill a dragon, and he really doesn't want to marry Utah, he does it anyway because he knows that his folks back in his hometown are going to see him and want him to be successful, and that conquering prince to become a king, because once he marries Utah, he would become king. So they have this, and the prince does not do a good job. He barely tries to slay this dragon, and Armand just kind of like feigns death, and Utah sees all of it. So she knows that this is just not genuine at all. She ends up marrying the prince, and she hates her life in court. She hates having to have her hair done. She hates how her husband hates her, and just everything about courtly life she can't stand. The one person she ends up befriending is an elderly gentleman, and he ends up dying. So she's again alone, completely miserable, and then just going day by day of what am I to do? While Utah is suffering in court, Armand decides to go on a spirit quest. He flies and flies until he can't fly anymore, that he comes upon this island where there's this cave, and he finds some of his ancestors that are encrusted in ice. And he's able to speak with the spirits of his ancestors, and he just wants to die. He wants to give up. He is the remaining dragon of this very long line, and he feels like a failure because he cannot produce any more dragons because he can't fulfill this ritual. And we find out how more dragons are created through this terrible ritual of sacrifice of a beautiful princess. And Armand kind of comes and realizes what he has to do, and then just makes peace with himself, and he ends up going back to his castle, and Utah is still miserable at court. And with Utah still being at court, still being miserable, some things happen. There is this water monster in the sea that is apparently threatening to destroy all of humanity unless he gets a human sacrifice. So the king, married to Utah, who doesn't like Utah, doesn't want anything to do with her, goes, "Hey, I know who could be sacrificed." So they make this plan. They tie Utah up right on the seashore, right in front of where this monster would be. And the sea starts swaying and bubbling up, and this monster starts coming out, and it's coming for Utah. And then Armand comes in and just as a dragon and destroys this monster. They fight. At one point, you think Armand has been drowned because he's underneath the water for minutes and minutes. And then you see the sea monster's body, and then Armand finally comes out of the water, and he's coughing up water. He's trying to struggle to breathe. The king, he is embarrassed and just marches off, forgetting Utah. She's still tied to the pole. She had accepted death and was like, "Yeah, this is it. This is how it ends." And Armand looks at Utah and says it's the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And with that, you kind of make your own conclusion that they have their own happily ever after. I did enjoy this story. I know it's technically a romance, but I felt that the focus was more on the character development between Armand and Utah, how it's just two people who had to learn to not be so self-centered. They had to mature, and they had to learn to not be so unapproachable and to break down those walls that they would keep for their own protection, for any past slights that they had. And I really did enjoy that. I liked seeing these two people interact with each other, as well as how they interacted with the world around them. I do believe that if you can ever get a hold of this book in English, to give it a read. I did appreciate it, and I think you might as well. Have you read this book? What did you think about it? And as always, what should I read next?